Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 52nd and best episode of the Hashcast. And as always, I have a guest way cooler and way more interesting than myself. And tonight I have a man of many talents, Alexander Winn. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. So, Alex, I know who you are. I know what you've done and what you have achieved. But for people who might not know exactly who you are, can you give us a quick intro on who Alexander Winn is and what is it that you do?
Yeah, so my name is Alexander Winn. I'm the founder of Edgeworks Entertainment, which is an entertainment company that I'm building off of the success of a video game that I made called TerraGenesis, which is on iOS and Android, and it's a terraforming simulator. So you can take a planet like Mars and thicken the atmosphere, add water, add life, and eventually turn it into a planet like Earth where people can live out in the open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've been playing it for a couple of weeks now until my wife told me to put my phone down. So I have successfully terraformed Mars.
Excellent.
But I'm going to ask you some questions about it later because I have some very important questions and revelations that I had all of a sudden. But to go back to your background, like game design, and now you're the founder of a company. Like, what came first, the businessman or the game designer?
The filmmaker, actually.
Okay, let's get into that.
Yeah, so I actually, growing up, I played video games. Mm-hmm. Everybody plays video games. And in high school, a friend of mine and I started making a Halo 2 machinima series. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people might be familiar with Red versus Blue. Yeah. And they are the most successful machinima series of all time. And we were actually the number 2.
Okay.
We used Halo just like they did. And where they went for kind of the South Park comedy kind of thing, our series was more in the genre of actual Halo. It was an action drama thing about the Spartans and the Covenant fighting and that sort of stuff. We were in high school. We were just goofing off, but we ended up making this 20-episode web series called the Codex, and it absolutely blew up. We got over 90 million hits. Wow. We were featured on MTV and NPR and all sorts of stuff. And so the name of the company that we made to make this web series was Edgeworks Entertainment. Yeah. And then, the bad part about machinima is that if you're making it with Halo footage, you can't sell DVDs because it's Halo footage and you don't make the Microsoft lawyer team angry. Yeah. So that was high school. And then I kind of went off to college. Yeah. I went to USC Film School and I had learned how to design websites to help support this web series, to do the community and that sort of thing. I started getting kind of odd jobs making websites for companies and for other people just to pay my bills. Ended up getting into app design, again, just to kind of pay the bills for something to work on. And just started making apps in my spare time. I made some stock investment apps and some productivity apps. I made a media player and a couple of text-based games. And then I had always been saying that somebody ought to make a video game about terraforming. Yeah. Terraforming is awesome. Why is, and it kind of exists a little bit in certain video games where you can terraform this planet and it's you spend 500 gold and in 10 turns this planet will be terraformed. Yeah. But it's not that was missing the point for me. So I've always thought that somebody ought to do it. And I kind of looked up one day and I was like, I'm a developer and I actually know how now. I've got to a place where I could make this game. Yeah. So I did. In my spare time. And I made this game and I released it. It was actually my 25th app on the App Store. Yeah. And tossed it out there and it absolutely blew up. And Yeah. And so off of the success of TerraGenesis, I was able to take Edgeworks Entertainment, which is this name that I've been using forever, and started actually building a real company. My wife actually stepped in. She's an actress, and she stepped in and helped handle a lot of the company stuff, getting us set up as a legal entity and hiring so that I could keep focusing on the game. And so now Edgeworks Entertainment, has kind of existed for 1 year and has kind of existed for, 14.
Yeah. That is just amazing, though. Having two things blow up like that is the dream. You had on the Codex 90 million views. That's 900,000 times more than my average podcast. So that's it's not bad, I must say.
Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, that was before the days of YouTube. That's back when people would just put movies on their own website and you'd play it in QuickTime or whatever. So I don't have any subscribers off of that. I just have, people who are like, oh, yeah, I remember the Codex.
Yeah, that's
every once in a while I'll run into somebody who's a Codex fan.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm gonna see how many people remember that. So then you make the game. Let's talk a little bit about that game, because it's I don't think it's enough credit to say it's a terraforming game, because I could not put it down.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and it was it's a mobile game, but like you say, it blew up. Like how do you process that? Like you just put it out there, because I think I read 10 million users on the app.
I think we just passed 11 million.
That is, first of all, that's congratulations. Second of all, that's nuts.
Thank you.
So how does your brain deal with that? Like you put it out there, and all of a sudden it just starts going. Like how does it look? I'm always curious. How does it look like when you put it on the App Store and do you get 11 million emails that it's been downloaded, or like how does it work?
There are analytics pages. So when you put something up on the App Store, there's a page that you can go to see downloads per day and all that kind of stuff. But the funny little wrinkle about the release of TerraGenesis is I had started it. I was living in Los Angeles with my wife, and I had started it when we were engaged. And we had gone on vacation to Australia and New Zealand for 10 days or however long. And while we were there, we kept running into these Americans that were there on a working holiday visa, which is where you can go for up to a year and you can get jobs to pay your way. Yeah. But the trick is that if you're an American, you can only do it if you're under 30.
Yeah, I did that going into Canada. Exactly the same thing.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Well, we were 29 and we were engaged. And so, or I guess 28 at the time, but we were going to be 29 when we were married. And so we decided that we wanted to do this thing. And so we got married in April, and I was turning 30 in September. Yeah. So it was like, oh, we got to go right now. So I had been working on this game, and it was actually in New Zealand that I released it. Yeah. I had been working on it for several months, and I had quit my job. My wife and I had both quit our jobs, and we moved to New Zealand, and we were entirely prepared to wash dishes and work on farms and stuff to pay our way. And instead, about a month in, I released TerraGenesis, and then I moved on to my next. I did not expect it to be this huge thing. And then, the next day we got 100 downloads, and the next day we got 500 downloads, and then the next day we got 1,000 downloads, and it just kept growing. And before long, this is what we were doing across New Zealand. We ended up spending 6 months road tripping across New Zealand with me on my little 11-inch MacBook Air, typing away, trying to upload updates on hotel Wi-Fi. Yeah. And it was just a matter of kind of watching the stats go up and up and up and up and up.
That is nuts, man. It's so funny though how that happened, that you're on vacation and completely not prepared to oh, there's a patch I need to write right now in this internet cafe. But that's awesome, man. That's so cool. How did you come to, you said you always want to do the terraforming, but when I was playing it, there's a lot of science stuff behind it. Did you do the research, or did you go off to the stars and try it for yourself and then come back with that kind of space knowledge? How why terraforming? Why did that
so the original inspiration for the game was a trilogy of books called the Mars Trilogy. It's Red Mars, Green Mars, and Blue Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. Okay. And the thing that was so powerful about it was I always kind of warn people when I tell them to read these books, because they're amazing and everybody should read these books. Yeah. But at the same time, they're very slow books. Emotionally speaking, I often liken them to being on a road trip. And you know how you get into that meditative place of just kind of watching the landscape roll by? That's what reading the Mars Trilogy is like. There's a lot of just driving across the landscape. But the author was so interested in scientific authenticity that as you read about these characters that are just driving across the landscape, talking about mountains and craters passing by, those are all real mountains and craters on Mars. You can actually drop a pin where this chapter is taking place, and they're describing a view that you would actually have from that location on Mars. Yeah. And the whole book series was about terraforming the planet, But at the same time, it was about changing the society.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the analogy that I always use is that when the Europeans came over from Europe to North America, for a while they were British and French and Spanish. Mm-hmm. But after a while, they stopped being British and French and Spanish, and they started being American. Mm-hmm. This book series is about the rise of Martian society as the terraforming process goes on. And so forever in my mind, the idea of transforming the planet and transforming the society were linked.
Yeah.
And the depth of scientific accuracy was a huge selling point.
Yeah.
Because that was the cool part, was that this was real. You know, this wasn't just somebody's like imaginations of what a hypothetical red planet might be like. This is actually Mars, the actual challenges that you would face on actual Mars.
Yeah.
So that was rattling around in my brain. And then the proximate cause of TerraGenesis was The Martian, which is a lot more fun. It's not like just watching the landscape roll by. It's funny and it's exciting. But it has that same very, very close to real science aesthetic.
Yeah.
And, you know, the book came out and it was a big hit. And then the movie came out. And I was watching the trailer for the movie one day. And I thought to myself, you know, if I was smart, I would have my game about the science of colonizing Mars available on the App Store when this movie about the science of colonizing Mars came out. Yeah. The problem was that it was coming out in a month. Yeah. And I actually did. I made TerraGenesis in a month, but it was real bad. Yeah. It was just not a fun game. Yeah. And so I ended up letting that deadline pass me by. I worked on it for another 10 months, got it polished up, and released it. But to answer your question, the whole kind of driving inspiration for TerraGenesis had from the very beginning this idea of scientific accuracy. Yeah. And I'm a big enough nerd that I didn't actually need to go out and do a ton of research because I just learn about this stuff for fun. And so I knew a lot of it off the top of my head. I obviously didn't know off the top of my head like what the surface temperature of Europa was and that sort of thing. But there was plenty of stuff that I did know. The rest was, you know, freely available.
That is so cool. So I couldn't help but, and maybe this is like, that's the point of this game. When I was playing, like I could not stop thinking about like our own climate and climate change because I moved like a slider too far and then everything just went to shit and I drowned like a 20,000 colonist. Sorry. Was that? Did you have that in mind, or did you have it in mind to have like a teachable moment in that game, or is it just like I hope people pick up on that?
You know, there's an interesting kind of midpoint between those two, which is that I don't want to educate you, but I also want you to notice. It's not just I hope they notice. Yeah. It's more like, you know, when you play Civilization. Yeah. If you didn't know about the Celts, you're going to learn a little bit about the Celts. Yeah. You know, you might learn a little bit about Egypt. Yeah. Who knew about Hatshepsut until they played Civilization? Yeah. A lot of people had probably never heard the name Qin Shi Huangdi until they played Civilization. Civilization is not an educational game, but you pick these things up as you play. Yeah. And that was kind of the aesthetic behind TerraGenesis. It wasn't here to educate you. But it was going to pepper in a lot of real science and a lot of real information and just let people pick up on it as they play. Yeah. You know, we could have used atmosphere units. Yeah. But let's not. Let's use pascals, which is how you actually measure atmospheric pressure. And so the same thing with climate change and that sort of thing. You know, people get so worked up on the political issue of climate change. But when you talk about Mars, they don't get their hackles up. Yeah. Obviously, you can change the surface temperature of Mars. That's a thing. Yeah. That's still warming a globe. It's global warming, but it's not as touchy. Yeah. And so, hey, let's talk about climate change and these other things in this other context where you can play around with different possibilities and just sidestep the whole controversy. Yeah. And we don't sidestep it entirely. You can actually play on Earth in TerraGenesis. Okay. Yeah. And the way I describe playing on Earth is it's like somebody has handed you a game of TerraGenesis that they've been playing badly. Okay. So when you start a game on Earth, it's like the seas are rising and the ecosystem is collapsing and you've already got 7 billion people. Yeah. So you have to deal with those things. But yeah, it was definitely a goal to introduce people to the idea of, atmospheric pressure and oxygen content and all of these sorts of things in an environment where it's more of a blank slate and they can just take it in.
Okay, I love it. Like I would, everybody listening, recommend trying it. Like I did Mars. I think I beat it at 50 million people on the planet. But like this kind of game that gets me going on the min-maxing things. Like I'm trying to find that perfect setup, and then realizing I made a bunch of stupid mistakes because I still thought I had to buy like habitats, even though the planet was already habitable. So I spent way too much money on building houses that nobody needed. But no, it's fun, and it's such an interesting point that you make. But if you talk about like changing a climate on a different planet, it's like, oh yeah, that's science. We can totally do that. But here it's like, no, please.
Right.
But that's so cool. So now you have 10 million players. You're a game designer. Now you run a company. I'm assuming that's your job, like all the time now. But how do you switch that skill set from like, okay, I'm gonna make that one game on my road trip through New Zealand to like, okay, now I run entertainment business. Like how do you switch?
It's it wasn't that hard because it was always the goal. Even back in my days in high school making the Codex, I wanted to start a studio. I've always said that, my goal was less to be Steven Spielberg and more to be, Jack Warner, or, of the people living today, one of the people that just have my dream job, if I could just be that person, is Kevin Feige, the godfather of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh yeah, that little thing,
yeah, exactly. I mean, you may have heard of it, but yeah, the idea of working on all of the projects was always more attractive than the idea of specifically guiding this one project through to completion. So as soon as I got the opportunity to hire some devs and hire some marketing people and build a team, that was the dream. That was not a difficult transition to sell me on. I mean, there's plenty of difficulty in actually pulling it off, but it was definitely the goal. Yeah. And then it was just a matter of growing the company, growing the revenue to the point where we could afford to have these people on staff. Yeah,
it's like I still can't believe how, because some people might say, oh yeah, you have that one lucky shot, but in your case, no, you have two like huge hits. You clearly know what you're doing. Where does your like you said, you had the dream to do this, but where does that drive? Where does that fire come from? That creativity to hit that twice? Like I find that so interesting. Because a lot of people are happy with once, right? And you did it twice. Like, where did the juice come from?
I think that's a really good question. One of the elements for sure is I'm not a workaholic. No. But what I am is I'm kind of addicted to checking the next thing off my to-do list. Mm-hmm. Like I really enjoy that feeling of progress, and so that helps because I'm the kind of guy that doesn't come home and relax by, vegging and watching Family Guy. Yeah. I'm the kind of guy who comes home at the end of a long day and wants to relax by making a thing. Yeah. And so that's how you can have 25 apps on the app stores because making things is fun. Yeah. But the other thing. And this is actually something I've talked to a couple of people about, but not ever, publicly. There's this theory that I've been developing of where your satisfaction level lies, and then where your like how hard is it to please you, and how hard is it to satisfy you? Yeah. And so somebody like Steve Jobs. It's impossible to satisfy him, and it's really impossible to actually please him. Yeah. And you can find different people, and it takes this much to satisfy them, and then it takes this much more to please them. I think for me, it's inverted. Yeah. It's really easy to please me. Yeah. I like pretty much every movie I ever see. Yeah. I listen to most music that I encounter. But to satisfy it takes a lot for me to look at something and be like, yeah, it's done. Like there's nothing more that we can do. And so when you combine that with the kind of unstoppable interest in checking the next thing off the list, what you get is a never-ending list and then the drive to keep punching through it.
Yeah.
And then the last part, and this is definitely, worth mentioning because I think a lot of filmmakers and game developers don't allow themselves to go here as much as they ought to, is interacting with the fans is the most fun thing.
Yeah.
And, as soon as you have a community, even if it's only like 20 players, man, set up a Facebook group for them and talk and chat, and they will become your acolytes, which is invaluable from a marketing standpoint, but they will also become your encouragement to continue. They will give you ideas, they'll give you their opinions, and they'll encourage you to keep going. And the fans, both on the Codex and now on TerraGenesis, have been so phenomenal in supporting me and us in what we're doing.
Yeah. That's awesome. I just started a job in PR, so I'm going to cut this piece out and send it to everybody in the team. Like, look, talk to the fans.
Seriously.
Free tip right there.
Worth mentioning, by the way, when I was working in New Zealand and it was just me, every day I would start my day with a couple of hours of responding to every single email, every single Facebook message, every single Facebook comment, every single everything. Both because that's customer support, and when it's only you have to do customer support. But also to grow the fan base. The fans are not something that you should sort of hand off to the marketing person. They're a group that you should be interacting with a lot. Yeah. And it's fun. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Speaking of that, shout out to your social media lady, Heather, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, Heather.
Yeah, she's fantastic. I've been chatting with her for a bit, and she's a wonderful person. So Heather, thank you for setting this up, because she reached out. It was like, oh yeah, of course I'm going to talk to Alex.
She's awesome. Yeah. She also has engaged with the fans. We get people who have never played TerraGenesis coming into our social media just because her meme game is so good. Yeah. Heather will respond. Heather will have an entire conversation with a fan in nothing but GIFs, and it's hilarious. Yeah. And so she has become kind of a celebrity herself among our fans of just like, I'm here for the meme lady.
That's perfect. Well, you've built a pretty good thing for yourself, and I find that like double impressive. Because like I said, it's one thing to know how to build a game and to geek it out and to do the code, and then to build a code, but hire the right people that just fit right for you and create this whole enterprise. In your success, you kind of said like, okay, I want to be the Kevin Feige, but who are the people that you've worked with that have inspired you, who've acted like a role model, or that helped you get where you are today?
It's an interesting thing because I'm a self-taught programmer, so I don't actually even know very many other developers. I had a few day jobs, and I certainly, had mentors among my day jobs that were very helpful and very encouraging. And again, in the film world, I certainly had teachers and mentors. But it's an odd thing to be a self-taught developer and a self-taught creator, because you kind of look around and you're like, I have a question about the industry and I literally don't even know who to ask, but certainly, I don't know if it's weird to describe your wife as a mentor, but my wife has been huge support in building Edgeworks and in everything. She's just been incredible. She's a co-founder of the company and she's incredible. And then, going all the way back to just my love of storytelling, I very much credit my parents, but especially my grandmother, because for the first 13 years of my life, every weekend I would go over and have dinner. We'd have tortellini and peas and chocolate ice cream, and we would watch a black and white movie.
That's awesome.
And so she was a huge inspiration in making me fall in love with storytelling and entertainment.
Yeah, good pick on tortellini. It's one of my favorite dishes.
Right? Yeah.
But now that you are at the space where like you can become the mentor, does it work like that? Do people come to you like? Because I always find the dev world is a pretty tight knit group, but like you might like orbit around a little bit because it only took you to build this thing. And do you go to like the talks or GDC, or do you go there at all?
Yeah, no, we've been to GDC the last 3 years. We're starting to reach out into more conventions and trying to make more connections. It's a little tough because on the one hand, like I said, we don't really know anybody in the industry right now. And then also our story is so unusual that we've got this weirdly like quiet hit. Like we've had 11 million downloads, but we've never been featured on the App Store.
That's weird.
And we don't get a lot of press. It's like people kind of haven't noticed that this incredible thing is happening. And so I've gone several times at GDC over the last couple of years. I've got my little name badge that says Alexander Winn, Edgeworks Entertainment CEO. And people will tell me afterward that when they see CEO, they just assume that you just own your own company. It's just you. That they don't even stop to question whether you actually own a company, with employees and stuff. So it's right now we are very much in the phase of making connections and getting to know the industry that we kind of fell sideways into.
Well, scroll down on the list. Like I've got a couple of people you should probably talk to. But like there are a couple of those one-man wonders in this industry. Are you looking to be bought up by Microsoft for $2 billion anytime soon, or is this something you want to keep to yourself because you can do whatever you want?
Oh yeah, no, I'm going to be building Edgeworks. If I could wave my magic wand right now, Edgeworks Entertainment would be like Disney. It would be video games, but it would also be movies and TV shows. It would be books and music. We're building this company very specifically with an aesthetic in the same way that Disney is magic, is like their brand. The Edgeworks brand is exploration. It's discovering new worlds and new aspects of our world. So with TerraGenesis, we have real science and real history. There are so many people that have contacted us over the last few years that have said, you made me fall in love with astronomy, and now that's my major. That playing this game has introduced them to something that they had never known about before. And that is exactly what Edgeworks is about. Whether it's with science and astronomy, or it might be, introducing you to some fascinating aspect of like African history that you'd never heard about, or, the jazz scene in New Orleans in the 50s, like whatever it is, introducing people to these worlds that they have yet to explore. That's what this company's all about. So I'm not going anywhere.
If you're going to be the next Disney, I'm going to like brag about it obnoxiously that I had you on my show before that happened. Just so you know, I'm gonna push that hard. But like you clearly are not a guy that likes to sit still. So what are you working on right now? If you can share it, I'm not sure if there's super secrets going on, but like I have a feeling you're already working on the next thing.
Well, we do have our super secrets, but the thing that we can say is right now all of our efforts are focused on TerraGenesis 5.0, which is the biggest content update in the history of TerraGenesis. It's going to be coming out very soon. We're just fixing the last few bugs, and it's going to be huge. We've got 7 new playable worlds. We've got multiple new game mechanics. I actually just finished making the changelog list of all the changes. And on my, giant computer screen, it's like 3 screens long.
Wow.
So, it's going to be huge, and we're just ironing the kinks right now.
Because this is a free-to-play game, right? You can just download it for free, and then the model is like you can buy some boosts, and like I didn't need them. I found it very forgiving to just play at my time. I did look at a lot of ads because it did bother me. Like the multitasking, right? I do a thing, get the thing. Okay, here's my free GP. Put it down. I do have one very important question. And I'm not sure if this was a joke or if this is something I misinterpreted. When I have a good colony going on, it costs me like about $1 million to stop a comment from hitting my people. However, if someone goes onto like an anti-science, anti-education streak, it costs me $25 million to undo that, even though I had like only a couple of colonies. I was like, wow, is that like a dig at like idiocracy, or is that just Because it didn't happen
It's
often.
well, it's a couple of things. So the first is an assumption that asteroids, these days we think of the idea of shooting down an asteroid as being really hard and something that you need Bruce Willis for.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, this is also a game that is set in a spacefaring society.
Yeah.
So when you have multiple cities on Mars, the idea of getting out to an asteroid that's coming in is not actually as big a challenge. But also, it was a sort of a reference to how damaging anti-intellectualism can be. We tend to think of modern examples, and I'm sure everybody listening can think of somebody in the modern world that they think of as dumbing down society.
Yeah.
But especially if you reach back further into history, there have been some real movements away from knowledge, away from learning. And whether it's religiously motivated or socially motivated or politically motivated, whatever it is, like when these things happen, they can set that society back by centuries if it really gets its claws into the culture. And so that's what that was. It was a by the time that pop-up appears in your game, it's already started moving, and you're going to have to kind of undo some damage that's already been done.
Yeah. I couldn't even afford it. I was like, "What? I have like $3 million. Like, I'm screwed." That's just what happens, and that's what I found interesting because, like, you're working on this stuff, and now 5.0 is coming out with like a whole bunch of new stuff. How much do you put it from yourself into there? Like, we kind of talked about, the whole climate change thing is easy because you put it on Mars, but this is a game that allows for a lot of commentary and sneak it in. Is that something you actively think about, or is it okay, this is a good game mechanic, but also it's like, hey, like a quick little light bulb that should go off in the player?
The thing that I really enjoy is presenting things that don't necessarily have commentary, but forcing the player to address how they feel about that. Because there are a lot of things that happen in the game. We actually get a lot of hate mail from people who don't believe in climate change, or who, they got a Muslim community in one of their cities, and that's absolutely unacceptable, and that sort of thing. And they will accuse us of being terrorist sympathizers or dirty liberals or, whatever. But the thing that I always come back to them and say is, Muslims exist. We didn't actually say that it was a good thing or a bad thing that Muslims live on your city on Mars.
No.
But they do now.
Yeah.
You can make decisions from there. And presenting the world as it really exists, that it's not a form of advocacy to simply acknowledge that gay people
exist.
Like, that's not commentary at all. That's simply being factually accurate, which is what TerraGenesis does in all things. And so representing the world as it is, but in ways that people don't necessarily think of it as being, is always a fun exercise. Because you force them to change how they think about both the in-game world and also the rest of the world, the real world. Because by building that framework of, oh, that's an interesting idea, then they can go forward and make their own decisions. But at least they're asking the question, which to me is the more important thing.
No, I think it's cool. Like, I can't wait to 5.0. I'm probably gonna pick it up again when my wife's sleeping, because otherwise, like we were away at the lake, and I was like, but just my settlers.
Right.
I'm almost there. Otherwise, the planet's gonna burn. Because you can't put it down, right? Like, it goes overnight unless you balance it out perfectly. Like, I woke up this morning, I'm like, fuck, I forgot to turn my thermal thing off. So
there is a pause button, so...
Yeah, I know, but then you don't get credits either, so...
Yeah, exactly. So it's always a trade-off.
Yeah, there is a trade-off. No, I'm looking forward to 5.0. So with everything you've done already, like a bunch of cool stuff, you have your own company. Are there still moments where you're like, I can't believe this is like my life now?
Yeah, for sure. Especially recently, actually. When we first started Edgeworks, we hired two people. So it was me, my wife, and two other people. So 4-person company. And we were working in a room that was about 8 by 12 feet. It was a little co-working space, and we were all jammed in right next to each other. And we did that for about 8 months, and then 9 months. And then eventually we got this amazing new office that I'm sitting in right now, which is, 10 times or more as big as that old office. And especially now, I feel so lucky with the team that we have, and my wife at my side, and we've got this amazing space, and we've got a balcony that overlooks downtown Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And with the sun setting, it's the most beautiful place to just kind of sit and appreciate what life has given you.
Yeah.
To just be in it. It's the most amazing feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I cannot imagine how. Because it's a huge hit, 11 million users plus, there's a decent revenue system behind that. How do you not count your blessings, but what would have been your backup plan? Do you have any idea what your life would have been like if TerraGenesis would not have taken off? Knowing you, it probably would have been something else. But just for the sake of.
I mean. On a practical level, before I made TerraGenesis, I was working as a developer in just sort of a go into the office job.
Yeah.
And so for a while, at least, I probably would have gone back to that when we got back from New Zealand. But the thing about me is I just like making things. Yeah. And, like I said, TerraGenesis was my 25th app. But before that, I have written 2 feature-length films and 3 television pilots. I wrote a full-length novel. Mm-hmm. I've started 4 web companies, and I've made untold numbers of websites, both for myself and for other people. I like making things. I like taking a project to completion. Yeah. And so if TerraGenesis hadn't taken off, I mean, by now I would probably be on my 45th app, but I would be making apps. I would be making things, because that's where the fun comes in. And it's, it's a funny thing, because when you have a success like this, when you build a startup, all the resources on the internet are designed at people on step 1 when you're building a company. Yeah. There's not actually that much on, okay, my startup is doing okay. Now what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so that has presented a lot of interesting struggles, because there are challenges, and there aren't a lot of eHow tutorials on how to do this part. And one of the things that I've really struggled with is I'm the kind of guy who comes home at the end of the day and makes projects to relax. Yeah. That's a core part of my identity. That's always how I've thought of myself, except now my personal projects are what I'm doing all day at work. Yeah. So what do I do when I get home? Yeah. And that has been an interesting, kind of process for me to figure out how to actually relax without working. Yeah. But yeah, if TerraGenesis hadn't taken off, I would have just moved on to the next thing.
We would have been talking about another game or app or whatever you made today, probably. I have a feeling for that. So there's a lot of people, like you said, they're trying to get into the market. They might have a good idea. They built the thing. Yeah. What were the key steps? I know you can't just I'm going to replicate this dude's steps to success, but what are the key factors where okay, this is where you need to pay attention? We've talked about your drive and the kind of person that you are. Mm-hmm. But what is the secret sauce? I know there's no secret sauce. Yeah. But if you could point it out a little bit, saying, okay, you want to make an app, these are the steps that are going to ruin you if you don't do it.
The main thing that I tell everybody when they ask for advice on how to proceed, and it's in gaming, it's in movies, it's in anything, is to not give up on the dream, but be very willing to move on from this project. Yeah. I benefited so much from making 25 apps in 4 years or 3 years or whatever it was. Yeah. So much more than making one masterpiece over the course of 4 years. If you are willing to dedicate yourself to the dream, but to move from project to project, just get them out. Yeah. One of the ways I described it one time was, if somebody, let's say the you from the future showed up and told you that your first 15 movies were going to be utter flops. Yeah. They were going to be terrible. They were going to be panned. Nobody was ever going to watch them. And then your 16th movie was going to make $1 billion and you were going to win an Oscar. Yeah. How would you proceed? Yeah. And almost everybody that I say this to says, well, I would just crank out 15 crappy movies to get to that 16th one. And that's exactly how it actually works in real life. You just get them out. You make stuff, and you learn so much by doing it over and over and over and over and over that eventually you do make something great because you've learned so much. When I was even just applying for jobs, even before I was starting my own company, when I was applying for jobs as a developer, I would walk in and they would look at my resume and they'd be like, oh, so you don't have a computer science degree? And I'd be like, no, I have a film degree. I'm a self-taught developer. And they'd be like, oh, okay. And how long have you been making apps? And I'd be like, a little less than a year. And they'd be like, oh, okay. And then they'd get to the part at the bottom of my resume that said that I had 11 apps on the App Store. And they'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got so many jobs just because of that, because I knew how to get it through the process, how to take a product, finish the product, move on, get through the project. And both as a job skill and then also building your own career, that is so valuable. I can't overstate how important it is to make things and then finish them. Yeah. Done is better than perfect.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's interesting. And you kind of touched on a question I usually ask, but this is going to be a slightly different one in your case, because I always ask, like, if you would go back and talk to your 14 or 13-year-old self, like, would that Alexander be, like, impressed with what you do? But in your case, you're going to be like, yeah, we got 11 million downloads. He's like, please, we got 90 million downloads.
I know, right? The Codex Alexander is not impressed.
But go back a little further. Like, if you would look back at what you wanted to achieve when you were older, like, would your younger self be impressed?
Yeah, I think I don't think impressed so much as kind of relieved and validated.
Yeah.
I think if I could tell like 9-year-old me what I was doing right now, I think 9-year-old me would be like, yeah, I knew it. Yeah, I knew it. Yeah.
I got a feeling your 9-year-old self is already like 3 steps ahead of most people.
Well, it's it's just like I said, this has always been the dream. So whether it was a video game or a movie or a book, whatever it was, I was always aiming to get here. So,
but I know you can't talk about like super secret project, but like I know what you're gonna do from project wise. Like, what's next? That's probably easily planned for you. It's project based. But how do you move on from being in the dream? Are you just like going to extend it as long as you can, or are new dreams popping up for a person like yourself?
I am lucky enough that the dream is a process. The dream isn't an event, like an actor's dream might be to win an Oscar, and then that's a thing, and then it's over, and now you have to decide what to do now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My dream is an ongoing job. If I could be Walt Disney for the next 50 years, that whole 50 years would be the dream. Yeah. And so I have arrived, and now it's like every day is the dream. Yeah. And that's not to say that there aren't some really stressful days. I mean, just literally yesterday, I pulled a 17-hour day in the office. There's a lot of stress, and there's a lot of fear and frustration and all of those things. But this is where I want to be. This is the thing. Yeah. And so, where do you go from here? The answer is, where do you want to go from here? Like, what do you want to, I turn to my devs and I'm like, so what's our next game going to be? And they're like, well, I've got some ideas. And I'm like, sweet, let's talk about it. And let's pick the best one and let's do that. Yeah. Because this is the dream. Doing this is the dream. So
the trick is not to wake up, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. How does it like to have people? Like you said, like, I just have a couple of talented devs. Like you pick talent. Again, a whole new skill set to like sift through other people's ideas and like find their passions. How do you deal with that?
That has definitely been a learning experience because as a self-taught developer, I don't have much experience in development. I never had a leadership role in any of my developer jobs. I did in film school, I directed a bunch of stuff. So I had some leadership experience there, but even that, it was we're all here to work on this project kind of leadership experience. It wasn't an ongoing career, how to nurture someone else's career and, hey, now they want a raise or they want a title bump. And, how do we kind of balance their work life and their personal life? That has all been really interesting and definitely challenging because the beauty of being a one-man band is that it's all up here.
Yeah.
You know what the next step is going to be. You know what it needs to look like. You know what the menu design is without writing it down. Learning to communicate those ideas to other people who by default have no idea what you're talking about. And you have to communicate every important detail if you want them to understand it, has been a learning experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask them to see how well I did it, but I've definitely been. Yeah, exactly. Follow-up questionnaire.
Yeah.
But I've been learning a lot, and it's been a really great experience getting to do that stuff because we've got some great people on the team.
Yeah.
So.
And that was interesting. I was watching the Netflix documentary Playing Hard about the development of For Honor. Jason Vandenberg, he's a lovely guy. I need to get him on too. But you could see his struggle from having his baby, like that was his game, like, and then all of a sudden there's 600 people working with his baby, and like it just didn't work. Like again, a complete different skill set, and maybe too protective of it, and then like you see the man just struggling through the whole process. So I always wonder what it's like for like a developer when like you call the shots and you know exactly what it's going to be. Oh, and now it's a team process. But I haven't had too many emotional struggles with having other people working on TerraGenesis. Part of that is just the people that I work with. We happen to end up with a bunch of people who are like super respectful of the idea, who didn't just come in and like, I've got new ideas. Yeah. And also probably the fact that it's all science-based has helped to kind of maintain the vision, because this is how science works. And if you want to do it this other way, tough, because that's not how science works. Yeah. But it's, I find it really exciting to get other people's ideas. I know the first time it ever happened with one of my developers named Noah, the first time I gave him a task that was not, I was just like, do this thing. Yeah. And I didn't give him any guidance or anything. He came back and it was way better than I would have done it because he had ideas that weren't my ideas. Yeah. And I find that endlessly thrilling. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I am very curious to see, like, I cannot imagine what you're working on right now. And I know you're not going to say it, especially not when the camera's running. But still, I'm very curious to see what now that you have like the team and the work and the office and like everything lined up just to blow our minds. I'm very curious to see what you're going to achieve then, other than from your 11-inch MacBook on the car in New Zealand.
You and me both. Yeah, we've got some cool stuff. We've got some cool stuff coming, and I'm sitting here myself, and I'm just like, what are we going to do next? Like, I have no idea, but it's going to be awesome.
E3 main stage. There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
So like you have put a lot into the world, and it's kind of always a question that I try to get, and it doesn't have to be like a game or a product or something. But what do you think? What did you put into the world to make the world a slightly better place?
The thing that TerraGenesis did, and that I try to do always, is share. It's kind of a cliche to say share passion. So I'll nudge it a little bit to make it a little bit more unique, which is share enthusiasm. Yeah. Because everybody in the modern day has kind of, to a greater or lesser degree, come to agree with the fact that science is important. Yeah. Science has helped society. And if you talk to some super religious folks, they might have some reservations, but even they'll admit that, like the internet is cool, medicine is cool. Everybody's on board with science. But the enthusiasm for science is surprisingly hard to find oftentimes. Getting people excited that it's not just about numbers and data and wearing lab coats. It's about figuring out how our world works and doing cool new stuff with it. The idea of exploration, the idea of discovering new things. And then, like I said earlier, with history, I know I am such a fan of history, and it's not just the Roman Empire. Don't get me wrong. I adore the Roman Empire. But I am also fascinated by Bedouin culture and, the Chinese Empire. And there's so many, Maori culture in New Zealand is fascinating. And there's so many things that people, it's not even that they're resistant to. It's that they don't know. They've never encountered that thing before. So if I can take my passion for these things and help spread that to other people, to help communicate my enthusiasm and show that not only is this important, but it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, this is exciting. This is really cool. You should look into this, and you can. You don't need a postdoctorate degree to get into this stuff. This is approachable. This is interesting. This is something that you can engage with right now. That is something that I'm really hoping that Edgeworks and TerraGenesis and I personally can continue to convey forever.
Yeah, no, I bet. Like, you already reached 11 million people, but is it still growing? Are you still? Is it still going on?
These days, I think we're weighing it at like 25 to 30,000 new players every day.
That is
something like that.
That is.
And
not
that's
featured
actually
anywhere.
kind of. We've gotten a few kind of like, when you go into the App Store, there's like the big feature at the top, and then there are the little lists of apps below it. We've been on the little lists. We haven't had any of the big featuring. But, it's. I completely lost track of where I was going.
Well, that's probably because it's mind-blowing how well that game is doing.
Yeah, it's a wild ride. And it's not even, how do I put this? With TerraGenesis 5.0 on the horizon, we've got all of these marketing opportunities that we're prepping that we haven't pulled the trigger on yet. Yeah. And so here in the office, the big question mark right now is, what's the world going to be like in, 3 weeks? Because we know what TerraGenesis 4943 is like, but when TerraGenesis 5.0 comes out, who knows what the world is going to be like. So,
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. This is just a fun question. What planet would you pick if we're going to send you to space right now? What do you think you have your best shots?
Oh, hands down Mars.
Yeah.
Before I met my wife, I would have said that if I got a ticket to Mars, I would go today. Like, that would be the only thing that could tear me away from Edgeworks Entertainment, is going to Mars. Since then, I've met my wife, and my wife has no interest in going to space. So,
it's a toughie. Yeah.
Maybe that might be less true now that I'm married to her, but going to Mars would be incredible. There are just so many things about that planet that are so breathtaking and so fascinating. And not just the, like, is there life on Mars question. But, Mars is home to the tallest mountain in the known universe. Mars has the Martian equivalent of the Grand Canyon is miles deep, and it stretches from New York to Los Angeles. Like, it's a smaller planet than Earth, but it has so many incredibly grand features. And the opportunity to be one of the founders of a new society, to be one of the first members of a new culture and help shape how that society is going to play out, would just be,
I think we're going to get there, our lifetime. Maybe not you and me personally, but now I'm just getting geeky with you.
I definitely think we're going to be landing on Mars within our lifetime. In fact, I think it might be way sooner than people realize. I think that landing on Mars is going to be one of those things, very much like touchscreen phones, where, what was it? 13 years ago, that was science fiction. That was something that people had on Star Trek. And then all of a sudden Apple was like, hey, iPhone. And then all of a sudden Android and Microsoft. And now, I mean, even just 2 or 3 years later, touchscreen phones were nothing. Like, everybody's got one of those. And that's how I think Mars is going to be. I think Mars is going to be absolutely unimaginable right up until the point when it becomes commonplace.
That's it's. I think it was recent that the Mars One project completely fell apart. Most people probably knew from the beginning because they did like an American Idol type show to get it out. But I'm curious to see, man. You never know what they're gonna come up with next. What do you think the biggest struggle is to get there? Like, as a society saying, okay, we're gonna invest in this to make it work, because it's not gonna be. Is it gonna be the public? Is it gonna be government sponsored? What are your ideas on this?
Well, I mean, these days I would put my money on Elon Musk just because he's the only one who's even aiming for Mars. All the governments of the world are aiming for the moon. But I think that the biggest challenge is going to be, if you ask Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson, They actually don't think that we are ever going to settle Mars. Not in any kind of real way. They think that Mars is going to end up being like Antarctica, where there are like some science outposts and there are like 50 people that live there and they rotate out and then they go back home. I could not disagree more. I think that the main difference between Mars and Antarctica is distance. Mars is so far away that if you get appendicitis, you can't just medevac to South America. No. You have to fix it there. And so as soon as there are people living on Mars, even just for a science outpost, as soon as there are people living on Mars, you're going to have medical facilities on Mars. You're going to have entertainment facilities on Mars. You're going to have food production facilities. You're going to have industrial production facilities just in case something breaks. Everything that you need. You know, the journey from Mars to Earth, depending on where the planets are in their orbits, is longer than a woman's pregnancy. So you're going to need to have some kind of something ready for if one of those astronauts gets pregnant and you have to have a baby born on Mars. Everything that humans need is going to have to be available, at least on Mars. And once you have all those things there, you don't need to go back to Earth because you have, by definition, reached self-sufficiency. And so the big hurdle is going to be getting to self-sufficiency, getting the construction facilities, the production facilities, the medical facilities, everything that you need on Mars, the food production facilities, everything that you need on Mars, getting that set up. And then as soon as that is set up, there's going to be absolutely no stopping it. It's going to be, you couldn't try to keep it contained as a 50-person science outpost because there are going to be people who don't have to come back to Earth and therefore don't want to come back to Earth. And once you have people who go there to stay, that's a society, and it's only going to grow from there.
And then the trick is to build coral reefs, what I have learned, apparently.
Yes, exactly.
Alex, this was amazing. I love just like digging into your brain a little bit because you're such an interesting fellow.
Thank you.
I always end on like what I call podcast and shill, where you can promote and plug and whatever you want. Like we talked about your game, we talked about the company. Is there anything else you want to put out there? And after that, I want to know where we can find you and keep an eye on everything you're doing.
Yeah, I think, the main thing is just TerraGenesis from Edgeworks Entertainment. We're going to be rolling out 5.0 soon, as soon as we polish off these last few bugs. And I think just, if I have a space to do a shout out, I'm just going to give a shout out to my team, Noah and Daniel and Heather and my fantastic wife, Lacey Hannon, and our fans who have literally made this possible, because this has been, like I said, this has been my dream. I get to live my dream job, and it's because people are playing TerraGenesis and enjoying it and helping to support us. And that's just the greatest gift that I could have asked for.
That's awesome. I always love talking to people who have reached their dreams, who are living their passions. Like it's always so inspirational to hear and seeing it work out. I like I said before, I cannot wait to see what you're gonna do next. But I'm gonna keep an eye out. And if you're listening still to this show, then you know what's coming next. Me not knowing how to close my show, but that's okay. So Alex, where can we find you?
Oh, TerraGenesis is available on iOS and Android and the Samsung store, and we have social media accounts on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Reddit and Discord. We're all over the place. Edgeworks is similar, and then I personally also have Facebook. I'm on Twitter at Alex for the Win, and all over the place. Just search TerraGenesis or Alexander Winn, and you'll find us.
I definitely recommend keeping an eye on this guy, because you never know what he's going to come out next. And thank you so much for being on the show. And if you're still listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I am the Hashtagonist, and this is the Hashcast. And every week I have cool guests like Alex, and we talk about their passions and what make them tick. And I think this was a great one with lots of cool tips and tricks. And if you have an app out there with 12 million downloads, give me a tweet and I'll get you on the show as well. Alex, again, thank you so much for joining, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right.